This space is intended to bring awareness to the hurdles of third-party reproduction and help navigate the anxiety and societal stigmas that come with it. The road to parenthood looks different for everyone. For those of us who can't have a traditional family, the aim is to strengthen the resolve against society's expectations. You're listening to Mothers in Arms. I'm your host, Leslie Lopez. This is episode Mission Motherhood. Cheri Bergeron is a former tech executive and entrepreneur turned best-selling author, speaker, trained life coach, and founder of the nonprofit Cheri's Choice. She is a #1 Amazon bestseller with her book Mission Motherhood. Cheri is helping women navigate non-traditional paths to parenthood on their own terms with clarity, confidence, and choice. Without further ado, let's get into this. Cheri Bergeron, thank you so much for being on the show with us today.
Oh, I'm really delighted that you invited me. Thanks so much.
It's always so hard carving out the time for a conversation, and not just a conversation. It does have an emotional effect, what we're about to talk about. So it really is appreciated you really opening up this conversation with me.
For me, this is a personal mission. So I spend most of my day talking about this. So it's just another day in the office for me.
So great. It's driven by your personal experiences. You wrote the #1 Amazon bestseller, Mission Motherhood. You wanted to let women know that you're not alone in the struggle to become a parent if that's what you want. I love the undertitle, Writing a New Fairy Tale of Love and Family. How and where, and tell me what inspired you to write the book?
Oh my gosh. I think having a child in my 40s and really being on a 10-year fertility journey, I realized that there were a lot of fairy tales that I didn't even realize that I was believing. And I think a lot of women carry these in terms of, one was you have plenty of time to have a family. And, there are women who can have kids in their 40s, even some in their 50s. You see it on People magazine and things like that. And it's glamorized. And so you think, okay, I can go forward and pursue my career and be really focused on that, and it'll all just work out. And then the other fairy tale is one about romantic love and family. And I really had this idea that traditional family was the only way to become a mother, and that frankly, you had to have a partner and to earn the right to become a mother. And that part really was a struggle for me to find the right kind of person. So I kind of force fit that at one point, and that was for me probably the worst possible choice. It takes a lot of time and energy, and ultimately something that did not succeed. And so I really wanted other women to be equipped with a more balanced picture of what their options were. Because sitting in the fertility doctor's office at 40, I felt betrayed a bit. I felt like I had been sold a bill of goods and I didn't even know where I got it from.
Oh, that's so true. I love how you say that. Sold a bill of goods that I don't know where you got it from. You've been told for so long the same thing in different ways. Just relax, don't worry about it, right? And it's such a misconception.
Right. And so I just started to try to rewind the tape about where I got these messages, because I thought I was pretty smart, pretty ambitious, pretty driven. And I was like, how did I almost miss the chance at motherhood? So that's really what my mission for writing the book was about, to try to broaden the narrative, maybe dispel some of these fairy tales, and tell women that you have the opportunity to plan for motherhood as proactively as you plan your careers. And that's really where the mission behind Cheri's Choice also came from.
Wow. This fairy tale misconception of not stressing to get pregnant, right? It can be a little confusing because, of course, yes, stress does cause issues with fertility. We know that. I mean, with any kind of, right, with sleep, if you're not sleeping enough, all these sort of things, of course, they affect your system. Nobody was talking to me about, hey, you should be counting your ovulation, maybe keep a journal of your cycle, maybe get your partner's sperm checked out, right? Like none of this was ever talked about with me until I was in my late 30s.
Yeah. Well, I think actually there's a much bigger societal narrative that we hear far more often, which is don't get pregnant. You know, almost 100% of teenagers receive sex education in public school. And what you hear is, and they make this belief that like, if you're off the pill, first time you're going to get pregnant. And so women carry this through our younger years. And we think that it's going to be this magical thing. But when you actually look at the statistics, you learn that it's fairly unusual to get pregnant right away, that the odds are actually against even a young woman to get pregnant. Now, I'm not saying, hey, let's do unprotected sex and all that, but I'm saying that we carry this false belief with us that we will get pregnant easily when we are ready. And that just isn't true. It happened to me when I was 36. I force fit that fairy tale and I was like, okay, I got the man, let's get going here. And it didn't happen. And it didn't happen at 37 and it didn't happen at 38 and at 39 and then at 40. You know, and frankly, I didn't want to know if there was something wrong with me. I was like scared to know. I think a lot of us are, 7 out of 10 women, we don't talk to our doctors about our fertility, our regular doctors about our fertility. There's something wrong there. So at 40, I'm sitting there in front of the fertility doctor, and he whips out this CDC chart that shows the realities. And it shows that fertility starts to decline at 30, and it starts to fall off a cliff at 35. And I was like, wow, I had no idea. I had absolutely no idea. And that is the educational gap that we face as young women in this country. And so that's a big part of the work that I try to do is to close that gap.
I love that. That's great advocacy, Cheri, that close that gap and focus on that. That's so powerful. I wish that part of that high school education, when they were handing out condoms and showing you what birth control is, that they also write, by the way, ladies, you're born with all the eggs you'll ever have. You're not going to have any more. By the way, ladies, by age 30, you have about half of the eggs left at that point. And by the way, 30 to 35 is a quickly diminishing window that you really do need to get ahead of it. And here are 3 things for you to talk to your doctor about, talk to your OBGYN about, talk to your friends about, right? Something as simple as the first day of your period, if you're in bed in pain, you can't get out of bed to be where you're supposed to be, that's a bad sign.
Yeah. Right. Irregular periods being an issue, egg freezing being an option, like none of these things have really been discussed. And I think perhaps early college is sort of the sweet spot for some of this. I wonder, my daughter's 13 and I think, would I want her hearing this at 16, 17? I don't know. But I think college age is really a time when we're thinking about our futures. Why not have something that, there's a lot of mandatory classes. Why aren't we teaching this?
100%. Like, when you go to college and you're walking around the job fairs or whatever kind of fair there is, why not? Should there be a fertility tent where you learn about your fertility health and the options that you have to freeze, to donate, to be a surrogate potentially, right? All these options of maybe you're not going to do it right now, but just dropping a little information bit down the line, just saying, oh, by the way, I guess I have about 15, 20 years left of really focusing in on what this could be. And, they're the best right now. They won't be as good right now if, in 10 years from now. It's knowledge, right? Like, who are we to say, oh, don't know that just yet, right? When you're in college, at that point, it's like you're out in the world.
Exactly. You're trying to design your life. And the fact is you need all the information. And really what feminism did for us is it opened up the world of the workplace to us. But it really kind of forgot to teach us some of these important facts about family building that we also need to know. So I believe that true female empowerment involves clarity, confidence, and choice. And so we really need to know all the possibilities.
The 3 C's. I like that. You talked a little bit about how the book is inspired by some of the loss that you had, the donor conception. Can you talk to us a little bit about that experience for you?
Sure. So since I was 40, we did try to see if my eggs were viable. For some women, everybody's biological clock is a little bit different. Some tick a little faster, some tick a little slower. And mine was ticking faster than the typical. And when I showed up there, the doctor said, "You're showing some signs of perimenopause." And I went, "Menopause?" What? I mean, menopause, the ugly M word. I couldn't believe it. And so they said, "Well, we're going to try to help you, and we're going to stick you full of hormones and all of that." And that process is such a roller coaster. And, you measure your life in these 30-day increments, and they say, "Oh, you're generating these many follicles. Are they maturing? How many get released?" And all of this. And it was like every time was a false start for a different reason. And so this happened to me, "Oh, not enough are maturing. This time, okay, start over. Okay, well, this time, not enough mature, released. That's an issue." One time, my then husband, it was the third time, I want to say, he forgot to take the STD test.
Oh my God.
Required. So they make a married couple take an STD test, and he hadn't done it. And then they said, "Go have sex."
Oh.
And I was like, yeah, I want to kill him. And I'm supposed to have sex with him?
Right. Oh my God. Otherwise you'd have to probably wait until your whole other cycle, right? You'd have to wait.
They were like, "This is the moment." They're like, "This is the moment. We can't try to inseminate you because we don't have all the data. So go have sex." And I was kind of grateful that one didn't work, to be honest.
So unsexy, right? The whole process.
I was mad as hell. I mean, that kind of thing. But then on the fourth time, my body just gave out. It was like, trying to make an old jalopy of a starship go at warp speed, and it wasn't going to do it anymore. And so really at that point, my only option was to use an egg donor. And I had never even heard of egg donors before at that point. I knew about sperm donors, of course. And what surprised me was that if you use the eggs of a younger woman, if I used a 20-something-year-old's eggs, then my odds of a healthy pregnancy were roughly the same as hers, even though I was in my 40s. And to me, that was like the fountain of youth. I mean, obviously there was grief involved with that because it's, genetically not going to be connected to me. And I had insecurities about that. And I was kind of mad. I'm like, my ex forgot to take the STD test, but it's going to be his biological child, but not mine, that's sort of thing. But what was important to me was to have a healthy child. And if trying to use my eggs, knowing that they were of diminishing quality and all of this, if that was going to get in my way, I wasn't going to prioritize that over having a healthy child. And so, I moved forward.
Wow. Getting there, that's not easy. That takes, for some people, years. I know for me, it took years to cross that sort of soft line of it's not going to be your biology and allowing a donor, the idea of a donor, and then moving forward with the donor search. And I mean, it's not for everybody. And it is a mental roller coaster ride. Did you have mental health support during this time?
Not until I had loss. And, the statistic is that 1 in 4 pregnancies end in loss, whether we realize that a pregnancy has been lost or not. And so I ultimately got pregnant using donor eggs and found out late second trimester that there was a genetic condition that made the child non-viable. And so this very rare thing. And I was like, how is this possible? I mean, we tested the donor, young donor, like you did everything right. And it was a non-specific kind of genetic condition. And so we really didn't get that much information. They said it could have been, it could have been her, it could have been him, it could be the environment. So it could be anything.
Oh my God, that is so frustrating to not know what it was after. That probably took about 6 months, or right? Like it takes
20 weeks sonogram is typical, and you think everything's fine, and then your world falls apart.
God, I'm so sorry.
It's brutal, and a big part of what's so hard. I mean, obviously you feel like you've done everything right. It's all your hopes and dreams have now kind of evaporated, and then you don't know why. So ultimately I pushed forward and wanted to continue trying to become a mother. At this point, my marriage had evaporated because, loss can do, I told you, we force fit this thing. So it really wasn't a great partnership to begin with. But when you add something like the loss of a child, people deal with this in different ways, and it really drove us apart. As I was entering my next cycle of IVF, I guess that was my second cycle of IVF, I was implanting 2 embryos just to, make sure that a pregnancy resulted, and I was doing it alone. And I found out that I was pregnant with twins. And almost immediately, they recognized that there was a potential issue with my son. I had a girl and a boy.
Okay.
And so that entire pregnancy was on pins and needles.
Wow. And wow. My goodness, I can't imagine how you felt during that time. Slightly back, I very much, yes, to your point of loss adds stress to couples, to marriages. And it's layered because you're both going through your own loss, your own experience of loss, and then your experience of loss together as a couple. And then you feel differently about it. Some of you talk, some of you don't, you share, you don't share, you don't share. And yeah, it adds on, it chips out, especially if you don't communicate about it. The more you don't communicate about it. My marriage fell apart as well because of all the shoving under the rug of what we didn't talk about, of how much I didn't speak up about. I want to try again. And even though I'd had 6 IVF rounds and, he was just like, I don't want any more. And you're like, I want it. I don't. I remember arguments. I remember just not really showing who I was or what I really wanted to do because of, right? In my case, it was male factor infertility. In that part, longer story.
That is a loaded story. And by the way, that actually ties in really well to this. So we're not together. And really one of the things, the straw that broke the camel's back was that conversation of, I want to try again. And he rightly said, hey, Cheri, you know what? We're not in a good place. And I'm like, yes, I understand that. But this is my purpose. I am not going to be fulfilled. I just felt so strongly that I wanted to be a mother. And I got to a point, I said, I'm going to do it with you or without you. And that's not really a great place in a marriage to get to that point. But what he then said was, if we're not together, I don't want to have any part of being a father. And that was the breaking point for me, because I thought, we had many embryos, and I thought, how could somebody know that their children were in the world you'd been through this process with me, and even if we're not together, how could you deal with that? How that you knew that there were children in the world and you had no relationship with them. So that was where I really realized that we weren't aligned in our values about parenting. And so that was the end of that. Well, he ultimately changed his mind and came back. And so documents we had signed and all of that sort of thing, he sort of reversed all of that, which made me feel more betrayal because obviously he had asked for it. I had granted that. It was our marriage, but then it was like, oh, do over. So what ultimately happened was that we had to deliver the twins 6 weeks early because my son was in distress. And it turns out that when he was born, he could not breathe on his own. Oh. And he too had a rare genetic disorder, a different one. And the odds of a woman having 2 children that had this combination of disorders was in the trillionths. I mean, it was almost statistically impossible. So that meant that there was an issue, that there was a known issue. And what we found was that my ex had a chromosomal deletion and the fertility clinic had never checked him. And this is one of the reasons why I do this work, because ladies, if you are going through fertility, have the man checked. They say that men are, almost 50% of infertility, and yet only 20% of men get checked fully, meaning genetic testing and things like that. I worked with the best fertility doctor in town, likely one of the best in the country, incredibly successful. Wow. I have great respect for him, but they said, we didn't test him because there was no known family history. And I said, when does this family history get identified? It has to get identified at some point. And so my son lived for 19 days and the test would have cost $3,000. Brandon's medical bills cost $750,000. Not to mention the anguish even of my ex to know that it was his sperm that caused this issue. That did a disservice to him, to all of us, right? To all of us.
To everyone.
Everyone. And so I just say, ladies, please, for your family's sake, please get the man tested. I've talked to other specialists. They say it happens far more than you would think.
It really happens far more than you think. And yes, I think it's safe to say if you're starting your fertility journey and they're not checking the sperm, go somewhere else. That is not correct. Both parties, you have to check the sperm. The same thing happened to me again with my ex-husband, where his male factor infertility, I was getting my eggs, they were being destroyed. Every time we tried to fertilize what I had just pulled, just gone. And I ended up having like the few little ones that I had left. Thank God I used donor sperm. And that's why my daughter is here today. And there's so many factors that simple solutions, right? To assist now with aiding male factor infertility, that I will make sure to put all the links to our episode here of where we can get that. I mean, it's simple things, right? Like men, a couple things I know is like, don't wear like the bike shorts, like men wearing, like if you're biking, like if you're pulling up the boys too tight, like that's not good for you, right? Hot tubs, saunas, cannabis.
Alcohol, obviously. I mean, there are those kinds of things, but the fact is, when we're going into this, we don't know all the information and we're trusting our doctors to tell us all of these things, but fertility clinics and doctors are imperfect. And so I learned a lot about patient advocacy through this process. And I think as women, we have to sometimes lead our doctors by the nose and say, I want you to do this test. We need to take charge of our own fertility journey and maybe trust our doctors just a little bit less and trust our own judgment just a little bit more.
That's right.
Because I asked the question after the first loss, I said, does he need to get tested? And a genetic counselor told me it wouldn't make a difference because it was an unknown origin. That's what they told me.
My God. And did you ever send a message to that?
I'm sure. So, I mean, at one point, of course, you think, should I be suing people? Should I be, should I be creating some accountability for these things? But the fact is, the way that I make change is by spreading this information.
Yeah, you're right.
How I can help, because honestly, they were operating by the conventional wisdom of the time. And so I really didn't feel like he was to blame. I felt like they were errors in judgment.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like it was malicious, like blame. But, there are real world consequences for these kinds of blind spots.
That's
and
right.
We need to try to make the information more clear.
So then, did you have any eggs left at that point in the freezer?
They had made them all into embryos. So I had to start over. So what happened was my daughter spent 40 days in the NICU because we had to end the pregnancy early, right? So she was 6 weeks premature. All of her systems were underdeveloped. Her heart, her lungs, her digestive system. She couldn't breastfeed, like all the things. She had a hole in her heart. Everything was broken about my daughter.
God.
And so that's a whole different show. But, prematurity is like a war zone. I mean, every day is like a week. But then ultimately, she came out of the NICU. She is a thriving 13-year-old. She is an honor roll student. She is fantastic. And so that process, all that pain did bring my incredible daughter into my life. And then I decided that I wanted to have a second child. So I started all over. New egg donor, because the other one wasn't available, and an anonymous sperm donor. And at 45, I started that.
Did you switch agencies for those donors, or did you stay with the same?
I did. I actually, not that it was, the agency did a great job, but I had used a premium agency because I wanted all the extra information and things like that. By the second one, I was like, oh my God, just, give me somebody healthy who's had a good cycle. And so I went directly through my doctor, and I had a perfectly normal pregnancy at 46. And I gave birth to my son 2 weeks before my 47th birthday.
Oh my goodness. What a blessing. Wow.
He was 8 pounds, 1 ounce, I want to say. He was huge.
Huge. 8 pounds, 1 ounce. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And so, the fact is, one of the things we believe is, oh man, your body, like a geriatric pregnancy and all of this kind of stuff. It's like my body had no problem whatsoever. This was an ingredients problem, not a physical health problem. And that's just another one of those myths that isn't true for every person. I didn't have elevated heart rate. I didn't have, gestational diabetes. I didn't have any preeclampsia. I didn't have any of those things. So it's sometimes true, but it's not always true.
Wow. So how was your delivery?
Oh, I mean, my deliveries, once you have a C-section, which was necessary for the twins, then you're always in C-section. But I'll tell you, I said, I have nothing to prove. I don't need to do natural childbirth. I've been through enough pain. So, I knew exactly the day we were having him. He was 2 weeks early. We were in the hospital for 22 hours. I was getting out of that hospital, even after a C-section, as quickly as I possibly could.
It really is a blessing, Cheri, that you got to carry that baby, having gone through all that had happened at that point, and then to be thrown into this like whole new hurdle, whole new planet, right? Really kind of must have felt like, and with all of this, and had such a healthy journey through it. What a blessing.
It was. I'll tell you, there's two things that were gifts to me that I believe were sort of God-inspired gifts. One was finally finding out why this happened, even though that was really painful information. And I wish that the doctors had done things differently. The trajectory of my life and my daughter's life would be completely different, although my daughter wouldn't even be here, right? That's one piece. The other was getting to have a normal experience in a way. I won't say that my pregnancy was normal because I had trauma, right? Any of us who have gone through loss, you get pregnant again, you have trauma. Every checkup, every blood test, whatever, I was expecting the other shoe to drop. I had an anxiety attack the night before my delivery because I was like, this is it. I mean, we're going to know if it's catastrophic or if it's great. And so I was on pins and needles that whole time, afraid to hope, which is something that we really struggle with. I think so many of us afraid to get our hopes up. And ultimately, I had a perfectly normal, on track kind of time with him after he was born. I mean, he was able to nurse. He was developmentally on target. My daughter was behind on every milestone for the first 3 years. I got to have normal. And I think that is a real gift.
It really is. And as an independent parent at the time, right, it's like, it's magnified so much more. These stepping stones, these milestones, it's a huge deal. Did you have a community of any type of support around you during this time?
I did. I mean, my greatest support was my mother. My father had passed a few years before I was heading through this journey. He kind of got sick fairly suddenly, and it was a very aggressive cancer and things. So that was shocking. But he kind of paved the way for my mom to be able to be with me. And so she came before the twins, were delivered, and she stayed with me. And in fact, my mother lives with me to this day. She's 83 now.
Oh my goodness, what a blessing.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then the interesting thing was other members of my family were not supportive. They were very religiously conservative, and they sort of relayed these messages that women tend to think themselves, which is, you wasted your chance, you don't deserve to be a mother, things like that. And to hear it from family members was so hurtful.
Goodness me. Like, to hear you don't deserve to be a mother. Really? Wow. I mean,
is none of our friends ever had fertility. Had infertility problems, that kind of thing. These are people who got pregnant like on their honeymoon, in their early 20s, things like that. And so there's a lot of judgment. But what is amazing is that other people in my village came out of the woodwork, neighbors, friends, who, even the nanny that came to be with me just a couple months before my son was born has become this incredible figure in my children's lives. I've made her the guardian, should I pass, and she's my kids' godmothers. And then she made me her children's godmother. And so, these beautiful families can sometimes bloom out of these unexpected places.
That's right. Bloom, extend. And I love this idea of when I'm not on this world, my daughter having all kinds of connections to people that she met through our journeys of untraditional families, right?
Yep. Absolutely. So it really is about, sometimes it's not your biological family that ends up showing up for you. And that's hard, but that doesn't mean they're not the only people that can really be meaningful in your life and in your children's life. So I say that biology is only one factor. And really what makes your village is love and acceptance and, and being there when it matters.
100%. I'd rather have someone by my side, asking me how I need to be supported and heard, rather than like a family member shoving a piece of enchiladas in front of my face so that I could feel better. Tell me about Cheri's choice.
So the book, which is right back here, was really about my experience, but Cheri's choice is about how to activate that for others. And so it really is about education and counseling and community support so that women can evaluate their values, learn about the different paths to motherhood, and, make intentional choices. And so part of my mission is to go out and speak with colleges, speak with young career women, let them know some of the things, close that educational gap that we have, and let them know that really true female empowerment is proactively understanding our values for the family we want and intentionally planning our path.
intentionally planning our path. Words of wisdom, right? 100%. It's not a bad thing to sketch out your fertility future, your dreams and aspirations of what it is that you want, and figure out a plan on how to get there, or and just know what's going to get in your way potentially and how to be your best foot forward at it. As you said, did I try everything?
Well, that's very true. And the other thing is, it's not too early when you're in your 20s to get a fertility assessment. It's a really good benchmark of where you are. It never even occurred to me that I could do something like that, or even at home kind of tests and things like that you can do so that you can figure out where you stand, even if you're not ready. And then if you really want to preserve your options and you've got the right, viability of eggs and things like that, freeze your eggs. That is one of the most empowering things that you can do if you feel strongly that you want biological children. And so there are definitely steps that you can take in your 20s to make things better for you when you're ready.
So true. I mean, imagine a young lady showing up to the doctor's office with I've been tracking my period and my ovulation for the past 6 months. Okay, let's get to work, right? As opposed to go home, come back in 6 months, tell me, what it is.
That's true. And there are many things that you can do to kind of understand both your hormones as well as your reproductive systems and anatomy and all those kinds of things. There's information that you can get sooner rather than later.
Cheri, thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, your words. I cannot wait to read the book and share it with my friends and family, my nieces, my daughter one day. Thank you.
I just want to say that, and I like to just reach across the internet waves to somebody and just say, if you feel that it's your heart's desire to become a mother, know that you can make that possible. I always say that with courage, determination, and a village that loves you, anything is possible.
Cheri and I have a few things in common. Our ex-husbands had male factor infertility. We both became independent moms at the age of 44, and the stress and obstacles that come with embryo creating affected both our marriages. You'll have to dive into her book and her upcoming podcast for more, friends. I surely will. That is all the time we have for today, friends. Thank you for listening. Liking this episode really goes a long way to getting the word out on this podcast. You can also check out more of these and similar stories on YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, and TikTok at mothersinarms.pod. Thank you. Until next time, friends.